Yeah, it was like this old one.
Okay, we are back for the final segment of our workshop today. Before we get started on the discussion on operating procedures, I wanted to highlight, we just went through a ton of policies, and there seems to be some misunderstanding. Some members of the public reached out to me, so I just wanted to use this opportunity to clarify. The most recent 4.22 policy we did on library books. I don't have it in front of me. There was a substantial amount of changes that have occurred over some time. The track changes that we have in front of us are not a result of a third party bringing forward a policy draft. Actually, that was so there was a group that did provide their input, as any organization or individual would be able to do so, and will continue to be able to do so when we put these forward to advertise. But that the overwhelming majority, well, actually more than that, was really a result of what had been already revised and worked with through our general counsel. Prior to that outreach, I think there was a cursory review and there were some tweaks, but there was nothing substantial that this third-party organization provided, nor did they provide a policy that we are picking up as a policy that we are adopting. And I will reiterate that we, with any policy, any member of the public, we advertise it for a reason, where we want people's feedback, and we do the workshop for a reason, so we can allow for opportunities for people to say this could be a better way to say it or not, or if there are certain concerns, please bring them forward to us. We welcome them from everyone. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go to the next item, which is board procedures. So I know that I'll let you talk through that, because there are we've had multiple discussions. I'm not sure what has transpired with the other ones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just thought, as we are now on the reorganization meeting date, that this was a prime time to pull out our current operating procedures as a school board, and maybe commit moving forward on an annual basis that we would take a look at our operating procedures as we go through each year and determine whether any revisions or updates need to happen. And so I had the opportunity, as I've reviewed hundreds of documents over the transition period, is to review the current board operating procedures, which currently exist in about 3 or 4 pages. And I took the liberty of creating an update to that to get us started in terms of our new board, our new direction, new superintendent, and way of work. So to really just solidify our way of work as a board moving forward, I created a proposal, a draft. Obviously, we could throw it out, we could adopt it, we could change it, and really just wanted to take this opportunity on the day of our reorganization meeting to consider this document and what potential changes or revisions or how you would like to proceed moving forward.
If I may, and I will say that while we had over the years loosely some operating procedures, one thing that, and if I reflect on this past year, there was when we did the last reorganization, there was a lot of changes that took place inside the district. So I don't know that we got to do this. So I appreciate this opportunity. I do think that this should be an annual review, no matter what comes about, of what's kept, what's not, or what iteration. I think there should be an inclusion that this is something that should be reviewed on an annual basis with the board. It certainly would afford for when you have a new board member coming in, they have the opportunity to review it and then also weigh in. These are best practices, or some are best practices, or what have you. I think oftentimes I can hone in on where I found challenges. I think even within this board, without not intentionally, but just to have pen to paper on how a certain process is. Mr. Edwards, for example, like how would we get something if you want it on the agenda, or if it's for discussion, and what that frequency is. So these are some of these, the way they're written, and I think that will help is guiding principles. I do want to make sure that however we take this is that it's, it is adopted and agreed upon, but what I want to make sure, as I read through this, still want to make sure the language reflects this, is that that nothing removes any individual board's, constitutional authority as an elected board member, right? There's best practices, et cetera, but I'll use an example of nobody wants to have a motion. I don't think anything would prevent a board member from making a motion at the end of the day. Is it best practice? No. But I want to make sure that this doesn't preclude, to circumvent any kind of authority, but that's really as a governing board, that these are rules of the road that we all mutually agree on. That's why I think it's really helpful for it to be reviewed annually, so each board member has the opportunity to weigh in and not feel like they're subscribing to things that tie their hands in any way. Does that make sense? Okay. So thoughts?
And I can give a little background of how I created it,
Yeah,
so
sure.
you understand. So I took the current procedures as they are now. I also incorporated board policy that would pertain more to an operation of the school board and pulled those specifically into the document. And then there were some other areas, and I can point them out, like on line 48, some general commitments or agreements that to foster good collaborative teamwork, some things that we could agree to as a team. I did that, pulled that from not from any particular documents that currently exist. And then, like I said, if you go through, most of these are either already in the current policy or procedures, or they are board policy. When you get to line 275, that would be an addition that I added in terms of expectations regarding board meetings and agendas. So that's language that doesn't necessarily mean it's policy or is current. That would be a new addition, as well as 306 and that section there. 332 would be new. 337 and that section down would be new, as well as 370. So those would all be new languages and really just agreements. And I do understand what you're saying, as long as it's not contradicting any of your constitutional authority, but just general agreements to make sure that we have a smooth, collaborative teamwork as we move forward.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you were.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
I read this, so thank you, Superintendent Connor. This is what I'm glad we're doing this, because this has really bothered me, because I've been on the board a year. So on Part 5, number C, speakers addressing the school board shall not make remarks which are irrelevant to the business of the school board or which are abusive, threatening, defamatory, obscene, profane, or otherwise of a disorderly nature, and play any CDs, all that stuff. So, but even though you say that, Mrs. Ziegler, when you go over the proper conduct, we have this, but nothing gets stopped when any person from the publicly attacks any of us board members, say very inappropriate things, bring up things that have nothing to do with the agenda, and it's allowed to continue. So I know we have freedom of speech, but we're not even following our own procedures here when we allow these personal attacks to take place.
So, no, where are you?
So if you go to line 235,
Okay,
so the
thank you.
numbers down the line. of the
Gotcha.
page,
Okay,
235. And this is actually board policy. So this is coming from board policy 2.22.
Well,
Correct.
I was looking really at 223, line 223.
And I don't know if this is a conversation Mr. Duggan and I have had extensively as it pertains, and this is more on the public comment aspect. And there are challenges, there's case law, there are different ways to look at it. I think that when it comes to petitioning your government, yes, should not. The question is it legally allowable to say certain things? That really is where it rises to the occasion, where you are trying to de-escalate. Sometimes it doesn't de-escalate. Maybe that was after being a board member of watching things get escalated with interrupting, removing, et cetera, it really it devolved to a much worse place. And what I've also found to be very challenging, and this is, my last day as board chair, so I won't have to be dealing with this, but is making sure that what one person says, how do you use that? How do you apply that truly evenly, especially when you're talking about certain things that are of a disparaging nature to elected individuals? Some people, and I hear you, I think it's awful, but it's a thin line that I think we find ourselves as a governing body, as individually elected board members. Yes, we'd like to have everyone come and speak to specific items on the agenda, to specific issues at the board. However, as a public meeting and as elected officials, there are a variety of different authorities that are allowable to the members of the public.
Then I think if that's going to be the case, then we either don't have this in here or we do it some way. I mean,
The question is shall.
well, I'll tell you, I read in one of the things, the myriad of information, that a school board should be, it's an extension of a school, a classroom. And I can tell you in my classroom, anybody did any of that? I dealt with that immediately. If we are going to model what we expect from public and our schools, then we need to either follow what is in here to make sure we're not violating the law, or Superintendent Connor, you might have how other boards operate. I don't know.
I would just add, the difference is we're talking about members of the public coming to speak versus
No, but
I'm not encouraging bad behavior. There is a fine line in
But
comparison.
then we shouldn't have this in here. Because if we're not going to stop anybody, regardless of who it is, to be able to personally attack board members, then why have it in there?
Perhaps this is a question legally, and again, I think this is a little bit veering off the board operating procedures. This is more of a policy discussion as it pertains to our public, because Mr. Connor pulled this from our public comment policy.
Well, just saying, it's all under, if you want to speak, you fill out the card, speakers addressing the school board. I mean, it's all under the public comment part of what's going on, so.
So I guess the point is, it's whether or not, if it's shall or may, when it comes to members of the public speaking, if we were to remove them for disparaging remarks, are we allowable?
I'm not saying remove them. I think you stop, you stop it. I mean, I just think some of the attacks that have been allowed to take place over the past year have just been horrendous. And I know we're a public official, but in any other capacity that's, I don't know. I mean, I know we have difference of opinions of what people can say or not, but we have this in here, shall not make. I mean, shall's pretty like you
No,
won't do
it's
it.
shall, yeah.
If I may.
Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. I look at public comments as an elected official now, finishing up my third year. I was shocked when I got here and what happened my first year, 2 years, and it escalated into. It just got ugly and worse, and I think so if I roll all that back, and I'm a public official, and I'm sitting at a board meeting as a public official, one of the things that I put in the last policy that got unrolled was that your comments should be agenda-oriented, period. If you want to have that conversation, or you want to give something that's not, then it's at another time in the meeting. But before the meeting, we vote, that was the purpose of it being agenda-oriented, so that I hear, before I cast my final vote, I hear what these people have to say. And I loved that part of the policy, number one. Number two, I think that we're not necessarily limiting
people's speech if we ask them to put it in the form of feedback. If they want to personally attack or whatever it is they want to go after one of us personally, give it to us in the form of feedback. And so if we're using Mrs. Marinelli's analogy of being in a classroom, if somebody comes at you and says, hey, Mr. Edwards, you are nothing but a whoa, before, stop, can you give that feedback to can you give that information to Mr. Edwards in the form of feedback? In other words, we're not limiting their ability to speak or their speech, but we're asking them to put it in a certain context. And that's really where I would like to see more parameters around what and how. And I think I've heard Mrs. Marinelli say too, which I agree with, that's not in we have no control over that.
Right.
It's not in our chamber. It's not our lane, and,
Which is a lot of comment, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
right. So
It's a lot.
if we can get it into, listen, I love feedback, and sometimes I'll do or say something that's wrong, and I want somebody to correct me, or because I might miss it. So I don't mind feedback. I don't mind constructive feedback. I just don't like attacks, and the language was detrimental to our students. It was detrimental to our faculty, and it was detrimental to our community. It was ugly.
I think it still
didn't
is.
belong. It didn't belong here.
Well, it's embarrassing when they're students here to me.
I don't
find it
disagree.
very Embarrassing, and like I said, I'm not ever in favor of limiting someone's right to speak, but this is a governmental chamber. We have business to do, and that's what comments should be based on the business.
I would love that, but perhaps but I don't. I mean, I hear you, but
So then I think it should be an attempt to writing a policy or a piece within that says we want feedback, however constructive, and we want the comments to be agenda oriented.
And I think kind of in the current policy, it does address that, not in that language, but it says speakers addressing the school board shall not make remarks which are irrelevant to the business of the school board.
But what do we do when they do it?
well, you would warn them, and then if they continue, which 99.9 much happens, so then it is you're warning for removal.
Well, we turn off the mic. You
I've
don't-
seen it all, and even in
Oh, I've watched-
convocation, we've had
believe
well,
me,
and
I watched it all before I was a school board member on TV, and I never seen anything.
oh, your
like
mic is off. We didn't cut it. No, I'm kidding.
But
It was on.
I know it was on.
Oh, it was on. Oh,
Mr. Edwards, your mic was on.
oh, okay.
Oh,
May I?
Yes, please.
I guess I too think that I've always believed in freedom of speech. Tell me what it is you're thinking. I can handle it. It will help. I think there is a line of being a $1.5 billion organization and the professionalism that is expected of us in the community. A lot of the feedback I'm getting is that the community, and I'm sure we're all getting it, I'm not saying mine's any more than anyone else's or any less, but I've gotten what I believe to be significant feedback that the community wants more of a professional setting. And particularly because our primary function is to serve, deliver academic instruction and learning to students and serve families. So it's a complex place to be because I've always professed, and those that have worked with me through a variety of positions I've had in the district or at schools, I've always said, however, and perhaps we can consider this, perhaps we can come to an agreement to have a workshop to delve in deeper before we solidify this. When we had that belief, we also had a professional climate and culture within the school that was modeled in a variety of ways. I mean, sometimes there's passion where someone, has a legitimate outburst because of the passion of what goes along with serving children and families. It's a very, can be a very emotional setting, but I think that we have room to improve, and where does that balance lie, and what can we agree on? I feel like when it just goes to extremes in so many different directions, I have to tell you, my thought isn't about me. It isn't actually about my colleagues. As a principal for 14 years, I know what I'm doing is saying that behavior is okay in our classrooms. And that's what bothers me the most. When we accept it in this environment, I feel like I am telling the rest of the community that we provide government oversight for that this is okay, and that it then becomes the norm. And the person doing it, I'm not placing judgment on, because every one of those people feels like they have a right to say what they're saying. I'm placing judgment on myself of the climate and culture that I assume responsibility for that has the greatest impact on children and young adults. So for me, it's that professional organization. For me, it's the community that looks at us and says, I mean, I've had things said to me lately about people's perception of what goes on in this boardroom, and I take it serious. I take it seriously, but again, every time that something crosses that line of being perceived as an attack, and one of the things that we practiced, that I practice and we practice as a professional community in schools with our students relative to bullying or having a comfortable environment to learn in, that the judgment is in the hands of the receiver, not the person who delivers it. I mean, if you decide you're going to slap me, you don't decide how hard it is or what I feel. I decide that or such. I think we're, I'm not going to go as far as to say we're off course. I'm going to say that in our delivery to this community, we can do better.
I am all for raising the bar. I think it's unfortunate, as I think there's a lot of people who want to come to, and we've heard this over the years, that want to come to the meetings but have no intention or interest of listening to the kind of commentary or feel like that it's going to be towards them. And these are people who, and we want to be welcoming to everyone. And I'm with you. I think that I think that all of us have sustained a ridiculous amount of verbal attacks. If I was their way, oftentimes I'm looking forward to seeing how it's managed, or maybe it just goes away. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was triggering.
No,
but
it's not about a person. It is a climate. It's a culture. We're a professional organization. From my standpoint, having been part of this district since 1989, thank you, 89.
it's not.
What happens in this boardroom from a celebration standpoint, from a community engagement standpoint, has completely transitioned. The folks that are coming absolutely are welcome and have a right to come. The context of what is occurring is much different. We don't have parents and families coming in and celebrating the successes that have occurred in this district. It's a different climate, and I find it sad. And it doesn't eliminate providing feedback. It doesn't deliver it. And also, if you look at just look at if you want to look at the research on how to attain the results that you want to attain, you are speaking in terms of feedback. You are speaking in terms of, I'm requesting this is what I want. The attacks overshadow what someone wants.
That's right.
If you look at the research of how to have something received and get a response delivered that meets your expectations, it happens a little differently than some of the things that have become the norm in this chamber. So again, I welcome everyone. I will continue to welcome everyone as one board member. I think we can do better in meeting the climate and culture expectations of the entire Sarasota County community.
Don't disagree. I know. I think that the way, and I think that's good advice for anyone speaking, is them to understand that if you do have concerns, now some do just have the interest of just coming to disparage individuals. I mean, that's their goal, truly.
It is.
And so how you cut that off, I don't, this is probably where we differ. I think it's, right, so I think that, I mean, I guess that's their right, but I'm not. I mean, that's where I find it's a dicey story. However, but to the point of, if you really are coming with because we saw a lot of that. And to your point, Mrs. Rose, when it is, particularly when we're dealing in the realm of education, people's children, or even in their employment, it's not just their children, but it's their passionate issues. And sometimes you aren't able to articulate that in the most calm manner. And it's not intentional to be disrespectful, but it's just the passion. And sometimes it gets relayed that way. And I think we always understand that. And then there are others that are utilizing this time for,
Well, political reasons.
so, yeah.
Political,
If
disparaging people because they don't like us or whatever. But that really doesn't have anything to do with what we are to do. Like when we have these workshops, everything is, we really work as a team. And when we have the school board meetings, because I think there's so much negativity, you can't help but it kind of manifests itself sometimes
Well, it's energy. Yeah.
as a board. And I'm not immune to that. You've told me to be quiet times. So anyway, it's like I own my own behavior, but I just think we have serious things to take care of. Our superintendent has serious things. We heard it today on the whole ESE.
Yeah.
We have business to do. I mean, I'll stay if people talk, I'll stay till midnight to get the business done, because it's not going to stop getting the business done. But I just think we need to somehow get the control back, that this is not a place that you're going to just be able to come in and attack people. And I understand now, I didn't, but I understand now how the agenda came to be separated, where the first part was business, and then if you wanted anything else to say, you did it at the end. I'm not saying that that's the best way either, but
Actually, usually is the
I
best way.
understand it, why it was broken down like that for a while.
And I'll say, and I know that is usually the best practice, which I don't disagree with. It's just, it was at a moment where diffusion was,
Yeah, so
that pot is still boiling. I thought it was going to simmer out. Tell me, it's what they say.
So a couple of things. I liked that framework. I volunteered the last time out because I felt like, for me personally, after I sat through sometimes 3 hours of public comments and then had to sit down and make decisions about serious business, I was wiped out and tired after, hours of public attack. So that was part of where that came from. And if you notice, I mean, I watched the room quite a lot, and the people who want to attack usually get here early, speak early, and leave. And they're not even here for the whole meeting. And that's why I think if you're going to talk about something that's not agenda-oriented, then you should wait till the end of the meeting, and we'll be here till midnight to hear your feedback. But that was why it was split up, so that, to Mrs. Ziegler's point, it's free speech. They should be able to talk about what's bugging them or what they wanted. So it's free speech. Have at it. We'll be here for another hour at the end of the meeting to hear that. But I need to be fresh for the decision making. I also think what I'm hearing is that this is a topic that requires it to be its own policy, or have some sort of policy around public comment. I don't want to get away from some other pieces that are in this document. It seems to me, as I'm hearing this, that the chair and the superintendent had conversation about wanting to do these procedures. I don't know, but I would have appreciated just an extra step in here of saying, here's some things I like, here's some things I don't like, here's some pieces that I think need modified or additions.
That's now.
Okay, I know.
And I was going to say, and really, it was pulling, it was really, I think it came from conversations, honestly, from even each of you of saying, well, I wish, because I think just to have pen to paper, and I'll use the agenda as the example, and it's not just you, others, of how do we do this, what's the process, and wanting to be able to articulate it in a manner where it makes sense, and then does that work? But and then, you know, is it shall, or this is a recommendation, the best practice, but man, sometimes things go crazy and you still need to have the authority to be like, no, I need to bring something up and I don't want to be shut down. And that's one thing I want to make sure that this does not create, because that's why I said that at the beginning. So, but the first go at it is, yeah.
Most of the things.
So,
Yeah, I believe we can work this document as long as needed. So any feedback, and that's really is the purpose of this. It was really something for me, I thought, as, again, wrapping up the transition, looking at our way of work, and we've been so collaborative, is to really just take what we have currently that's on the books, flush it out a little more, make it a little more expansive so it's clear, explicit, direct, so there's clarity around how we operate as a team. So that's really the origin of it. And then we can work this thing as long as we need to.
I appreciate you doing
I mean, there's some things that are in here that's like, and there's also some things that are been pulled from other areas, but this is the first shot. Maybe it's digest it, figure out what you want in there. I mean, how far do you want it to go or whatever, but yeah.
I feel like we need to bring it back.
Yeah.
And have all of the
Correct.
5 board members here. And it needs more focused time and the ability perhaps to have one-on-ones. I think this is probably one of the most, I thank you for bringing it forward and giving it some priority importance, because I think it's one of the most important things that we do. The climate and the culture comes from the dais. It comes from us. And from that point on, we are responsible all the way down to the level of what happens in the classroom. That's the part that gives me the angst. You can say whatever you want about me. That's fine. That's your right as a U.S. citizen. It's the impact of that classroom and that climate and culture that we're normalizing when we have the ability, and we have 5 very capable board members to really, an extraordinarily great leader sitting with us, Superintendent Connor, where I think we can do some work with this and turn it into a win-win that respects freedom of speech, that respects the business of the board, that ultimately allows more citizens to want to come to this boardroom, particularly parents. And such. I think that we need to be more than what we've been. I feel that accountability. I do have a question about one thing in here, and that's that board members sit in on any district committees. And right now, the District Audit Committee, I'm assigned to sit in on that. I know that I've had multiple conversations with our CFO, Mrs. Penner, and she has a timeline to call that meeting relative to when the official audit is done and takes on that role. However, isn't that a board member sitting in on a committee?
Yep.
So that's, you know, I question, you know, should a board member be sitting in on that committee? And it's similar to Mrs. Marinelli, what you had mentioned. We are doing things in practice that we don't have on this. So there's that piece. And then secondly, there was one more piece of confusion for me. This is going to require a lot of work, I think.
Well, it's interesting because it's pulling from other, and this is as we go through and as we write. So if you look at the reference, and I think, I gave very minimal feedback outside of the prompts being, there are some areas, it would be great if we had pen to paper, but then it was, let's have the conversation here. A lot of these, if you look at them, are pulled from our policies, of which both, if you look at the public comment one, which clearly we need to bring back and evaluate. If that's because it sounds like that's the will of more than, well, I mean, so all of you have addressed that. So, and then, but the committees actually, that's part of 2.27. It's interesting as we go through a lot of our other policies, even this has areas that need to be adapted and edited so if Mr. Prento recognizes that. So because for what, to your point, there are some elements in here, and these have been in there for some time about, the chairperson, et cetera, about committees. I will say audit committee, it is in statute. It does require a school board member to be on that. So that's a different
Would
one,
be
but
nice, probably to add a caveat to this for the public, so that.
we just probably need to redo 2.27 as a policy in of itself. And any of the other ones that we come up with. So I also agree, because Mr. Enos is not here, certainly want to make sure. But, and some of these were, I mean, I'll never forget, if you look at 151, the prior board, there were multiple attempts. The real desire was always to have it just kind of ratified by the board every year so that everyone's on the same page. There was not a desire years ago for that, and I think it's fallen by the wayside. But you'll laugh. I mean, some of these things is, the requirement of a four-drawer file cabinet and et cetera. I mean, they used to have fax machine on this. I've gone through this many times. So it just shows that we have the opportunity to start from scratch or pull from the whatever has been piecemealed together. But I do think in a governance structure, and this was similar if we think back to, I was going through some past meetings, we had the discussion of Neola, but in there was the discussion, and by way of policy, of creating the board operating procedures. Whether you want to make them policy or not, there was that process of us working through creating something that we want to kind of rules of the road that really elevate the governance of this board, which I think elevates all of that. And I would say that since we find ourselves, thank the Lord, in calmer waters, that we are in a perfect timing to do this. So.
Agreed. Very much agreed. I don't think that we as board members are following this, and I'll say guilty as charged. I'm accepting a norm that right in here I shouldn't be. We have work to do, and I'm quite sure that we have the capacity collectively to do it.
So next steps would be, because there are a couple different things. I think that if there are certain things that you want, did I hear maybe addressing them during a one-on-one, and then you kind of framing that out in maybe a outline, and then we build upon it at that point. In addition, there are policies in here that, in my personal opinion, I don't know, actually, welcome. Do you want the policies to be workshopped separately, or do you want to build them as a result of the conversation we have holistically? Because both of them have are directly related to really ultimately the board's authority, meaning in the public comment aspect, how we build that. I know that's come up, making sure the language is matching a practice, as well as 2.27, which is board, what is that, board governance, board?
Committees, I believe.
I would let the superintendent make a recommendation, given that he
Committees.
provides the oversight for the government administrative position process. I'm not sure,
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, this is a good starting point. So we'll have one-on-one conversations around what each board member would like to see in the document, revisions. I'll aggregate that all together. I'll work with Mr. Parento around some of the specific policies that I've pulled out and included in here, and see if that, based on your feedback or any contradictory language that needs to be revised and updated, we'll bring that forth. Probably on the same cadence that we have. We've been bringing a section of our work session dedicated to policy revisions. So if there are any policies that need to be revised, we'll just bring it along with that. And then we'll take your feedback, and we'll bring this back together at a future workshop. And then eventually, we will, once we finalize it, we'll bring it for an official board vote on a regular board meeting.
excellent.
And I agree with that. And also, I mean, I don't know if any of my other fellow board members, but I'd like to hear if in other boards that you've seen how they conduct the public comment.
There's a variety of examples.
Yep. the ones that aren't like ours right now.
I will say though, and truly, and long ago, before temperatures rose for finding ourselves in unusual circumstances with a pandemic, et cetera, that you would find the best practice and best run, and we did do it, or at least we evaluated it years ago, was having the 2 public comment periods to the degree of board business and then general open, which allows for much quicker opportunity and others, and then not shutting down the opportunity for people to make general comments. And those were general comments about the district oftentimes way back then. But because something doesn't necessarily fit into an agenda item, the one thing I know we found ourselves not too long ago, again, temperatures are very high, was people would do both.
Yeah.
Right? And so then you're like, someone would start and then you'd have to cut them off midway of saying, no, that's not. And so, but I do find absent public comment, other things are working in a much better seamless process. And so, not a bad time to raise the bar.
And I agree with that, Mrs. Ziegler, that consideration. I think that what I noticed in my experience when we were separating them, the only thing I would want us to think about would be a family that came that felt like they couldn't get their issue resolved at a school, and it's a student issue, that there should be some venue for them to be able to fill out a special card and work with the staff that's always here, because that's where they're going to land regardless,
Yeah.
because we don't indulge in the operations piece by virtue of our official roles. So it's actually expediting them getting feedback versus the increased frustration of waiting till the end of a meeting when they have a concern for their child.
Very good.
I was just going to say, everyone touched on something that I was going to wrap up with in terms of cadence. I think there are priorities that this kind of slips in, like what we talked about early on, has a higher priority level than this. And for the most part, I think aside from public comments and some additional procedures that I saw that were on here that I think are more clarified than even I've seen in the 3 years that I've been here. But I think it should not be our number one priority. I think we can get through a lot of what this is, and public comments. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, and all we need to do is just codify that. And we can give you a lot of our feedback one-on-one, and then you give us that document. And
Instead of having 4 workshops on
yes,
public comment
yes,
again?
yes, I
I was
can't.
like,
I can't. No, please, no.
Do that again. I'm with you there. Whew. Yes, good stuff. Well, but all very important, and I think that there's a lot to pull from here that doesn't have to be so much laborious in a discussion aspect, but we'll pull from all of the topics or items that we said that can bring cohesiveness and really allow for good succession systems. So that concludes this. Are there any comments? Anyone have anything?
I think it was a great workshop.
Yeah, I am really
It was a very, from start to finish, very.
agree. Yes.
I just want to say I'm very thankful for the study on our exceptional student education services and the things that came out from it. I consider to be very productive, and I want to reiterate that we have extraordinarily highly skilled, high-quality staff, and that information will, in my opinion, having the opportunity to have a superintendent put systems and frameworks in place to address it will just enable our staff and be a benefit to our students. So I'm very excited about that piece.
Yeah, that was an amazing highlight. Long time coming, but very good opportunities. Well, if there are no additional comments, we stand adjourned. We will reconvene at 5:45 for the reorganizational meeting with our 6 o'clock board meeting. All right.